If you love flint and steel fire making, you should pay close attention to this spark catching tinder. It's common, it's easy to harvest, easy to process, and maybe the most effective tinder we've ever seen at catching sparks uncharred. And we have still never seen or heard of anyone talking about it or using it for flint and steel tinder. Well, our goal is to change all of that. So first watch what it can do, and then we're going to tell you all about it. So you can see right here, we just got a spark to hold on the first strike, which has happened to us several times, but it's still always pretty exciting. Now, there have been times where we were successful once with a tinder, but then it takes hours or days before we can get it to work again. So we can't put it into the category of reliable. And getting an ember on the first strike could, of course, just be really lucky. But then we did it twice in a row. And surely anyone who has tried to light uncharred tinder with a flint and steel can appreciate the significance of that. 2 embers in 2 strikes, which was a personal record for us. But how could we stop at 2? I mean, we had to go for 3 in a row. And boom. Now, a question. Is that the world record for first strike successes on uncharred plant tinder? Even if it's not, it's got to be indisputable that this common plant should no longer be uncommon in bushcraft and fire-making discussions and demonstrations. But now, to be totally transparent, it's not like we can always get it to take in 1 strike. I mean, usually it looks something like this. Under 10 strikes in about 20 seconds or less. This is typical for this plant. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, but when it's gathered and prepared right, this plant is always successful for us. And we do not use that word lightly. The plant we're raving about here is Pacific waterleaf. It grows in shady, forested areas and prefers moist habitat that gets regular rainfall. I'm combing the hillside for the dead, decaying leaves. And it's important to know that waterleaf sheds its leaves throughout the growing season, which means you will find perfectly healthy green plants with dead, decaying leaves under and around them throughout late spring and into the summer. Now, the reason I'm searching for the dead leaves is because I want a fire right now. And the dead leaves can be entirely processed just by hand to become immediately fire ready. But there is no way am I going to pass up these green leaves, because they are one of the reasons that this plant is such an incredible asset to the flint and steel fire maker. And I'll show you why in a couple of minutes. First, let's break down these dead leaves and we'll show you exactly how easy it is. Now, the goal here is to work these leaves down as small as possible. It only takes a few minutes and the leaves just crumble down into little bits ready for spark catching. You want to break it down as fine as you can, which we learned we can do just with our hands. The goal here is dust. The smaller and finer you can get these leaves, the more likely it is that they'll catch a spark. Now, after only a few minutes, you can see we've got an ideal spark catching pile. And one last demo of the dead leaves in action just for good measure. Now, we're never showing you all these successes just to show off what we can do. We want to highlight what these plants can do and what you can do with them. Now, we actually discovered these leaves by accident while experimenting with another tinder. A spark bounced off of my dad's shoe and landed on a piece of decayed water leaf beginning to smolder. Now, it's probably our most reliable tinder for flint and steel. Okay, but these were decayed leaves collected in the same growing season of the plant. How about earlier in the season when there's nothing but green, live, growing water leaf? Is it actually possible to use green leaves for tinder? Let's give it a shot. We've harvested and dried spring water leaf here. Again, these leaves can be dried for just a couple hours and then broken down by hand to make a reliable tinder. And when we say reliable, we don't mean it will maybe work sometimes if the right spark hits the right leaf. No, we mean it is almost certainly going to work if you have the right sharp rock and you're producing good spark. At least that has been our experience. For this demo, we chose to grind our green dried water leaf nearly into powder so you could see how effective that is. You've probably noticed that we fan with our hands instead of blowing on it. This is to prevent the ember from breaking up before it's established. Once it starts spreading and gets to be fingernail size or so, you can go ahead and blow on it or just transfer carefully into your nest. Okay, enough about water leaf. It's time to cover our next plant. So what do we have in common with this honeybee? Busy? Dedicated? Hardworking? Yeah, of course. But more importantly, we both love great burdock. The true story here. Last week, we're exploring a river island carrying only our striker. No flint, no tinder. And we come across this patch of great burdock and we decide we have to use these leaves for a flint and steel fire right here. So we harvest the dead, decaying leaves from all around the plant. And burdock leaves, they fall and decay throughout the growing season, and they can also be easily processed by hand, similar to waterleaf. Now, quick bit of advice, try not to breathe in this dust. It'll leave you with a pretty bad taste in your mouth. Believe me, I know from experience. Anyway, we went to the rock bed and we found some striking rocks, which were actually pretty poor quality, but it's the best we could find in our situation. We got several small chunks that could have worked, but in the end we opted for a bigger one that would give us better grip and feel more comfortable in the hand. This particular fire took some patience, and we actually ended up spending several minutes on it, but we eventually got it, even though our rock was low quality. We've definitely learned a few things about using burdock leaves for flint and steel tinder. First of all, the more decayed the leaves are, the more effective the tinder is going to be. So far in our experience, you cannot cut and harvest burdock green and then dry it for tinder the way you can with Pacific waterleaf and stinging nettle. And that is a little disappointing, but we're not complaining. I mean, it's still amazing to us that these leaves can make such a reliable tinder and be entirely processed by hand in only a few minutes. You want to make sure you work it until it's soft, fluffy, and that you have a big enough surface area to catch as many sparks as possible. On this day of filming, we were getting sparks to catch within about a minute or two, but we've had some batches that caught much quicker. As always, the quality of your spark is going to play a major role, but after a year now of experimenting with burdock, flint and steel fires, our conclusion is that it is absolutely reliable, and the only times we have not been successful with it are the times where we've tried to harvest the leaves green and dry them. This batch was harvested green and dried. No luck. At least not on this day. Even good sparks that normally gave us success would just fizzle and die. So far, we have not had any success with cut dried leaves, and we're 100% convinced that even if it's possible, it would be drastically less effective than using naturally decaying leaves from the great burdock plant. This was evident here when we were firing away unsuccessfully at a batch that we had cut and dried. And a spark ignited some of last year's burdock, which was collected off the ground after it had decayed naturally. Great burdock has certainly become a reliable tinder for uncharred flint and steel fires, but we've had some good discussions now about which tinder is the best. Our conclusion at the end of this day anyway was that waterleaf came out the winner in all categories against both stinging nettle and great burdock. It's convenient, it's reliable, and hey, it doesn't sting you when you're gathering it. But we still love the other two, and if you missed our video about how to do all this with stinging nettle, make sure you go back and watch because it's the original plant that started this whole obsession for us. Wilderness Strong, unique, up-close, detailed instruction covering nature, bushcraft, ethnobotany, and wilderness survival. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Also, we love your comments, requests, and suggestions. Keep them coming. Thanks for watching.